Hi, folks. I'm here talking to Frank Klepacki, the art audio director with Petroglyph Games in Las Vegas. He's perhaps better known for his work on the Command and Conquer soundtracks with Westwood Studios. So, thanks very much for talking to us today, Frank.
My pleasure. Good to see you.
Um, so, wanted to ask, when did you first start playing music? Like, what was your instrument, and then what did you want to do with music at that time?
Uh, well, the first instrument I started playing was drums, actually, and I basically I started at a very young age, and I picked the drums because I thought it would be easier than trying to play guitar or bass or something like that, and there was a condition that when I got started that I needed to take lessons for about a year, so that I did that, and I ended up progressing pretty quickly on the drums, and then from there, I eventually, by the time I got to high school, started to get the desire to learn how to play guitar and keyboards, and out of the need for communicating better with other musicians. When I had an idea for a song, we wanted to jam together and make up a song or whatever. I would try to say what was on my mind, and I didn't know what to say, and they just
Right,
looked
right.
at me like, what are you talking about? So I learned how to do that through that need, and then eventually led me to composing my own stuff. And then I was just interested in everything from that moving forward, recording studios and how tracking works and mixing and engineering, all that sort of thing. So yeah, it just kind of piece by piece kind of led me along, one thing at a time, to the path that I ended up choosing.
That's cool. And is it, you started working with Westwood Studios when you were 17, is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, how did you get into that
Kind of
gig? And
technically when I was 16, because that's when I first was introduced to the company, and I started out as a tester. So I was testing the games and trying to break them and report bugs and stuff like that. And being that young, I thought, oh, this is going to be the dream job, just play video games and get paid for it. Little did I know there's actual work involved in repetition of playing the
testing,
same
not
thing
as
over
much
and over
fun.
again to prove that it's fixed, and or how do you break it a number of ways, for doing things that are unconventional. So then I figured that out, but it was very magical because it was like behind the scenes for me, for like of how games are made. I got to see that firsthand, and that excited me. So by the time I graduated high school, I had met a number of people there at the company, and showed interest in the different departments, one of which was audio, and just said, hey, I'd love to be able to offer any sort of assistance in any capacity that I can. I have some experience. I've been performing professionally at that point, and writing my own songs and doing my own demos and all of that. So I kind of had a head start at a very young age of the knowledge I had and the skills I had at the time. So they, gave me sort of a trial period to, work with some different software and kind of prove myself that I could, catch on and do that sort of thing. And then from that point on, they said, okay, well, we can use you as a composer and, audio auxiliary stuff. And so the rest is history.
Yeah, it kind of escalated quickly from there. Uh, a
Yeah.
lot of people were asking, sort of, do you have advice on how to get into the industry? It seems one way to get in, just get in somewhere and then tell people you're good at stuff.
Yeah, there's that. I kind of had a very unique situation in the fact that when I started, like the original 8-bit Nintendo Entertainment System was the thing, and that was sort of on its last years of popularity. And then from there, moving on to the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo and all of the PC games, of course, that transpired from that point forward as technology improved there too. New audio cards came out, new video cards, and the types of and CD-ROM, coming into play as a new medium back then. So yeah, it was a unique time and place. Like you could say, I was kind of maybe right place, right time to enter. And be able to grow with the industry, in terms of my skill set being so young and everything. Like I could handle doing the Nintendo stuff and the Sega stuff and all of that. But then, I had the opportunity at least to catch up with the technology as it progressed and improve my skill set and, take side classes if I needed to, or, just crash course the manuals of these things and just keep doing what I do to keep getting better. Nowadays, you have to, graduate straight out of college with, symphony orchestra, capabilities and software mixing capabilities and all of that stuff. And there are schools you can go to just for that too. And, there's video game schools now, which did not exist, in the earlier days. And so there's definitely, and then we have the internet now, of course, which didn't exist when I started. And all of that stuff is accessible information to people now to be able to, at least get an idea of the skill set needed and the bar that they need to be able to hit before they even start trying to get business, or start working for a company. And the way that you start now is just, work with like some mod communities and work with like rescoring YouTube videos of gameplay, or
for the exposure.
Have an idea of, sort of what goes into making the game and or how a gameplay feels. If you're a gamer yourself, then you'll know, and then apply your creative interpretation of that, so that you have something to show people, that it sort of works as your demo, as your resume. Hey, I've put in some projects on my resume that I've worked with some small groups of people, indie developers, iOS apps, things like that. That's kind of where you have to start now. Yeah. Before you start getting into bigger and better titles. You have to have some sort of track record initially, and or decent demos in order to be able to prove that you can do it and that you're involved in the video game specific side of things, because there is a different mentality behind implementation of scoring music and putting in sound that is different from doing television or film or anything like that.
Right. So you really have to do it for the exposure for a while.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, obviously I don't encourage people to always work for free, but sometimes you have to in the beginning in order just to have something to show.
Catch-22 for a while, but... so I read that when I was looking up for this interview that you voiced Havoc in the first Command & Conquer game, the Commando, and then that you had some other roles. Have you done much voice acting or cameos or TV acting? Or anything?
Over the years I've done... a lot of different voice acting parts, but then I've also done a lot of voice directing too. When I was in the Westwood days, I would get called in to do like more obscure roles sometimes. Because in the early days we would just get voices from around the company. We'd have people in the company come in and do these voices. And so like in the Dune 2 and Command and Conquer and even Lands of Lore for that matter. I mean, we had a lot of people just from the studio that voiced the parts, and so. I showed, the ability to be able to come in and do some different characters, because I was always making voices and impressions and impersonations and creature sounds and stuff. I mean, you're an audio guy, that's what you do. It's everyday life, it's part of your personality.
Yeah.
So initially, like, they would want to record what they call stub voice, which is just temporary, just to make sure it works, make sure it's firing off, it sounds okay, and then we replace it with the real people later. And so I started off with the understanding it was probably going to be stub, but then if it worked out, then they would keep it, and that's kind of where that started for me. We didn't call the Commando Havoc in the original CNC. He was just the Commando. Havoc was his name in Renegade when we got to that point. But that was just... we were trying to find a voice for that particular character, that was a little bit more of a characteristic voice, not just a normal soldier who's supposed to be kind of special. So I came up with the idea of giving him this gruff voice. It's kind of funny, how I don't know if you're familiar with the old famous wrestler Macho Man Savage, but I kind of based the voice initially on his tone of voice, that kind of, hey, let's get over here and do this, So that was my initial sort of inspiration for that voice. And then they were like, all right, Frank, can you dial that back a little bit so it's not too exaggerated, but you still have that gravelly voice? And I'm like, okay, so I used a little bit more of my voice in it, but just kept it rough, So I was like, hey, that was left-handed, and stuff like that.
It's hilarious to hear that that's the dialed back version.
Yeah.
What could we have had?
Well, because, I used to look at the...
So with a lot of your music, you did, you put in... Sorry. Yeah, the audio cut there for a quick second, so I didn't notice you continued saying something.
Yeah, it was cutting a little bit on your end too, I think.
Okay, maybe it's the line. It's been very hurricane-y around here recently. We'll blame that. Okay. So you put a lot of sound bites from movies and things into a lot of the early tracks in particular. What sort of movies did you take them from, and why did you do that? It's cool.
Well,
Like,
so just to clarify that, I didn't actually sample from the movies. I actually had people come in the studio and record those lines on a microphone. That being said, there were several movies that we watched at the time that were sort of inspirational for the vibe of what CNC was in terms of, just the general, sense of war and whatnot. And, we were watching, everything from Apocalypse Now to Top Gun to, things like that. And so a lot of people, we would, have little meetings about that. And a lot of people would say, hey, have you seen this movie? Or these are cool quotes and stuff. And I was like, all right, well, obviously, we don't want to, sample direct, but,
yeah.
if there's inspiration to be had there, maybe we can do something with that. So there was a lot of music in that time period in the mid '90s where sampling was sort of a thing. You would hear like movie quotes and TV quotes and stuff that were inserted into electronic tracks and techno tracks and stuff. So I was like, all right, well, let's experiment a little bit. It was coming up with the soundtrack in general was definitely an experiment with a lot of styles. So I would record people saying these quotes, and then I would put effects on them to make them sound lo-fi or radioized or whatever, just to make it sound as if it was taken from something, even though it was created right there in our office.
Right.
And then so we put those samples in, and then once we got some of the gameplay testing with those scores done, we decided, this kind of interferes a little bit too much with the unit responses. So let's dial back those samples. So we cut a lot of that back out, and we only left minimal stuff in so that the unit responses would not clash with that. But when, of course, the soundtracks were released later, we released the original versions with some of those voices that we recorded in them.
That's cool. Because they sound like they're from 50s sci-fi or something that you've never seen, but they're actually not. That's pretty cool.
Sure. Now, when we got into like Red Alert and whatnot, there were some old, like really old sounding sampled quotes there, which I actually took from licensed sample libraries that were available at that time. So I didn't take them off of movies, but they obviously were part of collections that you could buy, to
right.
use in license for created music, and so therefore I would insert that stuff in because it was already legally available, purchased, licensed.
Cool. A lot of people ask, throw all the questions together nearly, like what's the favorite track you've ever recorded, and what's your favorite game soundtrack you've worked on? That's it.
Well, that's always the hardest question to answer because I've done so many of them. But I have different reasons for liking, a lot of them, on equal par because they're just different. I mean, the most favorite I have to go with is Star Wars: Empire at War because for the reasons that I was a lifelong Star Wars fan before I got to work on that. It was, and actually the very first Star Wars I saw on video for the first time when I was a kid, like really young, like about 3 or 4 years old even. And that's the first profound musical impact I remember as a kid. Because, as you know, when you watch Star Wars, the very first thing you see is the flash of the logo and scrolling credits.
Yeah.
Now, if you just saw a flashing logo and scrolling credits, it would not be exciting at all.
No.
But having that fanfare, awesome music go with it, that makes it exciting. So here I am, I know nothing about this movie, and yet I'm already hooked. Because I'm like, this is so awesome, and nothing's happened yet because the music was that impactful.
Yeah.
So from that point on, of course, I ended up loving all the movies and was a lifelong fan since. And I feel like I've kind of subconsciously groomed myself over the years to be ready to do something like that later in life. So when I started my career as a composer, John Williams was always one of my, go-to influences. So whenever I did orchestral music, that's of course one of the first things that comes to mind is a lot of his work, whether it's Star Wars, Jaws, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jurassic, whatever, Yeah. So when I finally got the opportunity to work with Petroglyph on their first title after Westwood, which was Star Wars: Empire at War, I mean, they knew from knowing me from the years previous, that I was a diehard Star Wars fan, so I would be the guy to, to do the audio justice on this from all fronts. You know, the sound effects, the music, and voiceover. Like my attention to detail on that, I knew it like the back of my hand.
He'll stay late. Yeah.
So that's a dream come true project for me. Is the point of the whole thing? Is that, you know, my whole life I've been a fan, and now I get my chance to work on an official Star Wars product. Yeah. I get to be part of that whole thing now, and so I was just in heaven for the years that we worked on that and Forces of Corruption. And oddly enough, I mean, I felt that to do that justice from my point of view was to not try to stand out, not try to do my own thing with any of it. No, any new music you're going to create is going to sound like John Williams. I mean, because he's the de facto, he's the master.
Yeah.
And I used his music from the films in a lot of the game, but any new spots in the game that was not directly reflected from the movies at that time, that's where I chose to add new music of my own in his style. And my goal was, if this blends in with everything else and nobody notices, then I've done my job. And, you know, and that basically is what happened, you know. I shot the music by the great people over at LucasArts for approval, and, you know, right out of the gate, they were like, yeah, you know what you're doing, so good job. So, a lot of great memories working with those guys, and really missed that studio too, because yeah, their audio department was amazing to work with.
Right.
So
it's real
in terms of,
validation,
you know, that's my dream project. So that's number one. Of course, you know, you got to go with you know, the Command and Conquer series. After that, you know, obviously I know Hell March is a very iconic song to a lot of people, and I'm very you know fortunate and humble to have that response have happened, because when it did happen, I wasn't even thinking about that, you know, like I was just like, let's just make cool music for this game and make sure it fits and has good attitude and pumps the adrenaline a little bit, you know. And the response that came from that was completely unexpected and just like overwhelming, but also confirmed that video game music is important to people, and it's now a viable form of music, you know, just as important to people as bands they like or movie soundtracks they like. It's the same sort of thing. Absolutely. So yeah, got to put that up there, and yeah, you know, that's I'd have to say, yeah, a lot of my favorite music is in there that I've worked on. But you know, I could easily point to many other games that have, you know, equal meaning for me. I mean, working on Blade Runner, for example, was awesome because that's yet another very popular sci-fi, you know, film that's iconic to people, and so the opportunity to do the game and recompose some of the original music from the movie, like completely redo it so that it's, you know, we could have the right to use that in the game, and then add some of my own music to that as well, is also pretty awesome. So you know, I had a whole new appreciation for Vangelis from really studying his music in that film, and all of the nuances and detail that he put into it. It was just like, wow, this is really, really great stuff, you know. So yeah, a lot of great memories, a lot of great tracks, you know, just too many to choose from to single them out, you know.
Great career so far, yeah. So what? I don't suppose we're going to see an Empire at War 2 now that Disney are holding the reins, are they? Although they're looking at a lot of games like 1313, they said this week that they might bring back.
Yeah. I mean, they're gonna go what direction they feel now, and you know, it would be great for Petroglyph, you know, to have an opportunity to do an Empire at War 2, you know, because that game, you know, did pretty well for them. So I mean, when we did it for LucasArts and Lucasfilm, so hopefully the time will come around where they might show interest in that again, and you know, let us do what we do best, you know.
It's cool. I will even pre-order that game. Just announce it. So a lot of people had questions about Hell March, of course, which you're mentioning. Favorite question I got in, because I absolutely want to know this. It's been bothering me personally for 20 years. What are they yelling in Hell March?
Oh yeah, the ever ongoing debate amongst the fan community. So here's the deal. When I first wrote the song, I thought that it would be great. Like, I was literally in my car ride on the way to work, and I thought, you know, wouldn't it be fun to write a cool rock and metal song to the tempo of Marching Boots? That was the original idea. So I thought about that on the way to work. I get in the office, and I immediately look through our sample libraries, sound effects, and I was like, I'm looking for marching soldiers, just so I can get something to start working with. So I grab the first, sample I find, and tempo it out, and just let it go. And I pick up the guitar, and the first riff I played, I'm not kidding, was that riff for that song. First thing that just came out, like, just, okay, cool, sounds like a good riff, let's go with that. And I wrote the whole song that day. And as I was sifting through those, sounds of military marching and whatnot, I started hearing these, like, muffled commands being yelled out, and I was just like, okay, well, maybe I'll throw that in too, as just because it seems like it fits the tempo of the song. Yeah. So I picked one that I thought sounded cool, and I had no idea what he was saying. I just said, that sounds cool, whatever.
So we'll never know.
And even the people in the office were trying to figure it out. Like they were like, "What is he saying?" Like some of my favorite things people thought he said was "eat my pants," "feed my plants."
Because it's not necessarily English or even Russian.
Yeah. I mean, it was very obscure because it's not really defined. It's not clear at all. I thought, I was trying to figure out, well, if it's in English, what is he saying? And at first I thought it sounded like "we want war, wake up" is what I thought it sounded like. I didn't say that's what he actually said.
Very close to what I thought it was the whole time.
Yeah. So I said that in an interview a couple of times, and it went around as being like, this is what Frank said. He says, "We want war, wake up." And then everybody started countering, going, "No, that's not what it says. It's Russian, it's German, it's this, it's that." And the most popular other thing that came back was that it's a German phrase that says "Die Waffen leg an," which is "ready your weapons" in translation. And I'm like, well, that makes sense, So I kind of went with that as, okay, yeah, that works. I'll go with that definition. That's fine, I wasn't there to record that guy, so I don't know for sure exactly if that's what he's saying, but it sounded pretty cool. So I said, yeah, sure, why not? Let's make it that.
Unless you still have the receipt for that SFX library.
As far as I'm concerned, that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
But like I said, unless somebody can track down that guy who said that command personally and ask him to clear it up, then you'll have your answer. But until then, I'm going with the German version.
Well, if you can't find the receipt for the Send library, we'll go with that then.
Exactly.
And that song it's almost the original one anyway. Or Hell March 1 is almost two different songs put together, like a rock-tronic one and then a more synthy side of it the next 3 minutes.
Yeah, the rock version is the definitive version, really, and the electronic version was just to kind of bridge it into some of the other styles that game explores, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like having a instant remix of it, almost, in a way, because the rock version was the first version that I wrote, and that was straight out of the gate. But I remember the President Brett Sperry telling me, hey, it'd be cool to have this, kind of turn into, something else to bridge the other styles that you have going in this game with, the cool industrial synth stuff and all of that. And I was like, okay, so I'll just continue the song then with that marching, and then I'll just immediately start a different style to bridge that gap. And that was sort of the reason for that.
Do you play the games yourself, Command & Conquer, or?
Oh, of course. I was there for the development of the entire project, so I played it quite a bit.
Sure, you were a games tester to begin with. So is it GDI or Nod for you?
I always liked Nod, to be honest.
You were not
because,
builder, weren't you?
Villains are fun. They have the cooler looking stuff to me, in terms of the different vehicles and the aesthetic of their faction. And, how can you avoid the charismatic Kane,
Shoryuken's pretty good.
I mean, I remember when we first were working on the game and we started making those first videos, that you saw in between the missions. And I personally was not, I didn't know anything about the whole Seth getting shot scene. So I was testing the game and I was playing through the missions, and I was getting to the next mission, and then all of a sudden he gets to that point where you see his head get shot out, and I was like, whoa! I was like, that is badass. So,
can we do that in games?
So it was, even for me working on the game, that was a shock to see that they put that in. and I was like, we have something special here. This is going to be a lot of fun for whoever plays this.
Yeah. And even then Red Alert was even like Game of Thrones is now like for just killing off characters every cutscene.
Yeah.
At least on the Soviet side.
Sure, sure.
So, are there any game soundtracks from other games now that have really impressed you in recent years? Indie or AAA or?
Well, in recent years, I mean, yeah, I mean, sure. I haven't played as many games recently as I would have liked to, but I really, I remember in the past, like a year ago, I played Skyrim quite a bit, and that was one, and I really loved the music in that game a lot. And I played most recently, in fact, actually, the latest game I'm playing is Transformers Devastation on the PS4, and so I'm enjoying the music a lot in that because, number one, I'm a huge Transformers fan, especially the original Generation 1 stuff, and that's what that game is based on, and I think they really did a great job with capturing that feel, you know, bringing back the original voice actors for the main characters, and then, of course, bringing back Vince DiCola to do some of the soundtrack to that, which was the guy who did the original '86 Transformers animated movie soundtrack, and that's one of my all-time biggest influences as well. You know, Vince, you know, did Rocky IV, he did the Transformers stuff, and he was a pioneer for the synthesized soundtrack progressive style, and so so the fact that they brought him back to do that was also amazing. And you know, and they had a cool mix of, you know, heavy rock and synth and sort of that older soundtrack sound that worked. So I really enjoyed that a lot. You know, and there's certain composers out there that I pay attention to their work that comes out because, you know, I think they're really talented and I like their styles. You know, guys like Alexander Brandon, you know, guys like you know, Jack Wall or you know, I listen to, I keep in touch with what they're working on, so I can, you know, check it out because I've enjoyed a lot of their work over the years. And that, you know, and there's new guys that come out too that do great work. So I try to keep my ear to the ground when I can. But for the most part, you know, I can only play games a certain amount of time in my spare time at home. Got a lot going on, so.
I think we're running a bit short on time. There's so many questions in from people. Just try to pick a couple of them before.
Just keep firing away, man.
Oh yeah. Well, you tell me when we're getting a bit tighter. We've skipped over a few so far. Donald O'Donoghue anyway asked, "Do you like any Irish music? The Irish bands you're into?"
Irish music specifically. Gosh, I mean, I don't know. Does U2 count? I don't.
Counts, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm familiar with some Irish bands. Well, I don't know how many are from Ireland. Dropkick Murphys is a band I'm familiar with, and you know, stuff like that. But I guess I don't know a lot of it, but I'm familiar with some of it. I do
Thin
appreciate
Lizzy is probably the answer he was hoping for.
I do appreciate like more cultural stuff, like especially because I listen to a lot of soundtracks or, you know, different music that is based in certain regions or areas. So like if I were to listen to traditional Irish folk music or something like that, like I think that stuff is really cool too, just because of the history and because of that. You know, I try to find ways to be influenced by that sometimes if I'm working on a fantasy game or, you know, things like that.
Actually, Emer Noon from Video Games Live is doing a traditional Irish version of the Zelda soundtrack, which is just
cool.
on Kickstarter at the moment. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for that one anyway. Alan Kaplan was asking, do you have any advice for us as composers and as RTS developers? So two very different things.
Well, I think I pretty much touched base on the composer thing earlier
on, yeah.
in terms of, you know, how do you kind of, you know, get started and get your foot going in the door. But as far as RTS development goes, gosh, I mean, it seems like there's not as many developers for that now. But you know, it's cool to see, you know, what has been done with that founding genre through other subgenres of it. I mean, what was really cool was we just watched the Video Game Awards last week that streamed live on YouTube and Twitch, and Lewis Castle and Brett Sperry both got recognized as game industry icons, which was amazing, to see. Cool, yeah. I mean, that was well deserved for those guys, and that really spoke to how RTS pioneered that movement of what became, the MOBA genre and things of that sort, in that we're familiar with now. And I think that doing an RTS right, especially, is something that is more of an elusive target. And I'm thankful to work with, still be working with the same team of people that a lot of them I've known for several years from Westwood, at Petroglyph. Great last year, which was or this year rather, which was awesome. Kind of brought it back to its roots. In terms of the more of the macro focus and base building and the 3 separate factions that were unique and then we've even done something different recently ourselves with a game called Battle Battalions, where we've taken sort of the core mechanic of how RTS and or MOBA works, but we've made it squad based. And we've made it about your units without bases, and it's more about capturing points on a map and having teamwork involved with being able to do that, whether it's PvP or PvE, and it's more action paced and quicker paced. The matches are generally 10-15 minutes long, and so it's that's been a lot of fun. I've been playing that a lot myself lately too, just because even after having made the game, it still feels fun, and you want to get in and cooperate with people and try to capture a map.
That's cool. That sounds great, actually. I used to always try to. You like Nod? I prefer GDI because Nod often just kill off their soldiers, and even in later games, a lot of the time the tactic was this one blows himself up or poisons everyone and kills himself. Oh, great. Yeah. Whereas I liked caring about the squad you put together and trying to keep them working together to stay alive. So that sounds like my kind of game anyway. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
How are you for a couple more?
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, sure. Alana Kelly was asking, what did you use to get the awesome industrial bass sound on the original Command & Conquer soundtrack, particularly Target Mechanical Man?
That's cool. So back then, I mean, this is 1994, 1995 that I'm working on that game. I was using all hardware-based synths then, so we didn't have the software synths we have today, which are fantastic and great. But I have a blog about this on my Facebook page about, some of the gear that I used, in that Westwood era, for the different types of games. But specifically for Command & Conquer, the original, I was using an Ensoniq ASR-10 keyboard sampler. So I was sampling my own sounds into that, but also using instruments that were made for that sampler at the time. And I was using a Roland JD990, which was one of the best synths you could buy at the time. And then I was also using a Roland S760 sampler for a number of instruments as well. They had sort of they called a preview disc, which had a lot of different sounds on it as a general palette to be able to use right away with the sampler, and then you could buy libraries after the fact. So I had that, and I bought a few extras outside of that to just kind of get started with it, and that was really the core foundation for all of the C&C stuff for that very first game. And then I kept buying more synths and sounds for each game after that to kind of expand the sound set and the palette and the quality, trying to get the quality to be a bit better. Of course, I used real guitar on the C&C stuff too, and it's kind of interesting because I was using that gear in such a way back then that was comparable to recording audio now, in terms of tracking audio in the computer programs and taking sections and looping them, right? Yeah. I would actually record live guitar into my sampler, get the one riff smooth that I wanted to play, and I would use it as a loop for the sections of the song. Because when I started recording things permanently onto like digital tape, I would get I would submit it for approval, and then they would say, hey, you know, we would like the song to be longer, or we would like it to, you know, change into a different part in the middle, you know, that isn't there currently. And I'm like, okay, well, now I got to go re-record it all over again, and that felt like kind of a hassle if I needed to make changes. So this was a way for me to be able to make those changes on the fly in the composition now, because I'm just triggering samples of audio that I've recorded rather than relying on recording it all to tape first. So I could let it live organically in the sequencer, and then make the changes easily, and then just, you know, bounce it out to a stereo track for them to listen to, and then we'd be done. So that became my method of working very early on, and then, you know, so it was kind of an interesting precursor to, you know, using digital audio workstations the way we do now.
So Pro Tools stole your ideas.
Ableton even.
I wouldn't say that, but I would just say, you know, obviously it improved to the point where we could do everything in the box rather than me having to use all of these other devices to get things to happen in real time in order to change them on the fly.
More office space.
Yeah, that too.
A few people have asked things like, what's your favorite game, Command and Conquer game, band? Any ones that you have right up here, you throw them out.
Yeah, I would say my favorite Command and Conquer game in the series, I mean, they're all great, but I remember having a lot of fun with Yuri's Revenge. That one stands out to me as just like, because I loved the subject matter. I loved that whole like mind control element, you know, that playing as Yuri's, you know, thing came into, and the movies and that were fun. I had a great time writing the soundtrack to that. I really just like pulled in a lot of that old timey, you know, sci-fi movie, you know, B-movie sound, but combined that with the Red Alert, you know, industrial rock-tronic sound that I came up with, and so it was just a really fun game to work on and to play because of the added faction and units to the Red Alert 2 game. I thought it made it better and enhanced the fun aspect of it. So that one stands out to me in terms of, you know, as far as playing it, you know, goes. That's the one I had. Firestorm, actually, from Tiberian Sun was another one that stands out. Because I remember doing Tiberian Sun and feeling like, gosh, man, I felt like we were working really hard on that, and I was strapped between multiple projects, and so as much as I enjoyed the cinematic aspect of Tiberian Sun, I felt like I wanted a little bit more out of the gameplay, and Firestorm provided that. I felt like Firestorm made Tiberian Sun even that much more complete, more fun, more, you know, the whole Cabal thing was fun. Yeah. So, you know, it's safe to say that, you know, those are two games where the expansions helped improve them, make them more fun, and those stood out to me as being my favorites to play.
I really enjoyed the Firestorm campaign. There was a lot of the commando type of missions with the mutants. It actually went deeper than even later games did with Kane. Spoiler alert, like when you get to the end of the Firestorm and you see the Cabal, Kane, like there's a question here, what is Kane? And I'm like, well, Kane is someone who keeps cloning himself, right? Isn't that what we learned at the end of Firestorm? Or
yeah, it would certainly appear certainly appear that's something that he was doing. So
I don't suppose there's an official Westwood. There was an official line on what he is, whether Kane was an alien or a prophet or a clone or a.
I think there was actually there's actually known you know, interviews and documentation that, you know, Kane was intended to be actually Kane from the, you know, from the, you know, the old original definition of that character, like from the biblical sense, you know.
Because Joe Coogan gives a lot of joke answers when he's asked in his interviews.
Seems like a fun guy.
He's classic for doing that.
Yeah. It's like there's no serious interviews you can find with him.
Yeah, pretty much.
You play a lot of music yourself in bands and things.
Apart from games.
You can even move on from that. Do you ever want to be in a big band? What do you play, like, you know, world famous touring band, or what do you play? Just covers, and you do original music? Do you want to tell us any about that?
Yeah, well, so early on, you know, when I was in high school, I always wanted to be in a band that made original music, and my goal was, you know, sell millions of albums, tour the world, and be in this, you know, famous band and all of that. That was my original aspiration as a kid, as a teenager,
Neat.
because I was already a really good drummer back then. So I felt that, okay, I've got a head start. This is what I want to do. Well, then I fell into the, thing of working in the video games, arena. And once I started that journey, I was still thinking about that. Like, I was like, okay, well, now I'm working in this video game company. This will be a fun job until I can sell millions of albums and tour the world and do all this with a band, right? So I was still trying to make it with a band the whole time I'm working at Westwood. And I was in some really good bands. We did some original music and put out albums and stuff. One thing that affected me early on was when I was about 12 years old. I saw the concert documentary called Woodstock, which was the Woodstock that happened in 1969, the original concert. And it was all of the popular bands of the time. You had Jimi Hendrix, The Who, Santana, Sly and the Family Stone. And at that time, I was more into the rock music, and I was interested in hearing the Jimi Hendrix and The Who and all of that. And Sly and the Family Stone, I hadn't really been familiar with yet. And when I saw their segment of Woodstock, it blew me away. It was like another big eye-opening moment for me, because this was a band that was, just super talented, incredible, had great songs, great energy. They moved an entire 400,000 person crowd right before your eyes in this movie. I mean, and no other band really did it to that level. There's a joke that if there was a battle of the bands of Woodstock, Sly and the Family Stone probably would have won it, because of the way that they really harnessed the energy of the crowd. And that spoke to me. And I said, not only do I like that music, because this is so different from what I was used to hearing at the time, but I love the way that they were able to do that. And that's something I would love to be able to be a part of someday. I would love to be a part of a band that could move a crowd that way, that could play that kind of, music that crossed rock with funk, with gospel, with, all of these things, these elements that came together that they did so well. So fast forward to, that being a big influence in my musical tastes. Like, I love funk music, and that's what I love to play the most, I think, of anything. I had my own, different funk bands that I play in, and I was trying to get to that sort of idea. I actually ended up meeting later in life one of the original members of Sly and the Family Stone, Jerry Martini. He's a sax player.
Cool.
And I wished him a happy birthday through a fan site one day, and then he chose to respond back to me personally and thank me for that, and was interested in hearing what my band sounded like. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I wasn't expecting that. So we started a dialogue and became friends. And whenever the Family Stone started touring again, they'd come to town, and he would let me know, and I'd go get to meet him at the show or backstage or whatever, and meet the band. And that was incredible enough to me. Like, I was like, this is another dream come true. I'm getting to talk to some of my musical heroes, And when it got to about 2008, I get a personal phone call from him saying that at the time they had changed some management, and a couple of the members of the band were no longer available to tour, so he asked me if I would be the drummer. So here I am, a lifelong fan of now this band, who I've A, become friends with, and B, I'm getting asked to play with them. So that was like a jaw-dropping moment. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. And hell yeah, I'm going to do that. So to answer your question, yes, I've had the opportunity to tour with a big band, because, and no less a band that I was highly influenced by through, half my life.
That's amazing.
So that was awesome. So I did that for a few years. I would have been happy just to do one show, and say that was a dream come true. But as it happened, it lasted for about 3 years. And then the original drummer returned to the band. So then I was like, yeah, that's great that he's coming back. So, I'll be hanging and watching you as a fan again, and no worries. So great experiences and great friendships from that, and very, very awesome part of my life.
It sort of satisfies that teenage dream as well.
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
to have done it, like...
And I always still perform live with different groups here and there, and I've even made guest appearances with Video Games Live, which is a touring, video game symphony and all of that. Tommy Tallarico I've known for years as well because he was at Virgin at the same time that I was at Westwood, and so our paths crossed, quite a few times there. And
they're
when he
back
started
here
that
in
up,
April, I think.
What's that?
They were here in April, and they're coming back next April as well.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll
So
join them again
what was
sometime.
cool was
See
I
them.
got to play Hell March live for the first time with an orchestra, with Video Games Live.
Yeah, Hallmark 3, was it?
Well, I did 1 and 2 as a medley with Video Games Live.
All right.
Then I went to Europe for Games in Concert, which is a different symphony video game show there, and played Hell March 3 there. And so that was again another incredible experience because, number one, I mean, I always thought it would be cool to play those live someday, but I just didn't know when or how it would happen, and that just ended up how it came to be. And then B, having a full 70-piece orchestra behind you is amazing. There's no other feeling like that in the world either. I found myself having like attention deficit going on because I wanted to turn around and watch them, but no, I have to perform.
So we've definitely taken up enough of your time now, so I'd say thanks very much. But do you want to tell us what are you working on right now? What's next?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, one of our newest releases, is Battle Battalions. So I would highly recommend checking that out. It's on Steam, and it's actually a free-to-play game. So you can actually get in and play for free, and just unlock things as you play, or you can choose to buy some upfront premium packages and things like that, just to kind of kickstart something if you don't have a lot of time to dedicate to it and just want to jump in and have fun. Like I said, it's action paced, high energy, and you can get in and out as many matches as you want. You don't have to feel like you're gonna have to spend hours and hours on it. So that's what's great about that game, and it was a fun soundtrack to make. Also, Petroglyph just this week released Mythion. Mythion is a fantasy mythological theme setting, sort of an MMO, very kind of Diablo-esque, I guess, but it has different gameplay functions where you have these stones that you collect and craft and create, and you make summoning. You can summon these stones as creatures or as objects that help you in combat, and you can group up with people or play solo. Which is nice to have that option, so you don't have to feel like, oh well, I have to be involved with a group. No, you don't have to, but you can. And that I'm glad to see that get released because that was there was an attempt to release that years back, and it just kind of got botched up with the launch in terms of the way the publisher had handled the launch and all of that. So it didn't really last long, but now we were able to have the rights revert back to Petroglyph, and now be able to re-release it as sort of a classic game in our repertoire, and it's very atmospheric, which is cool. The one thing I can say that I love about that game is the atmosphere of it. It's very inviting in terms of the environments, and they're just cool, and the mythological thing is fun to be a part of, and the music that I did to that. There's so many tracks. It's ridiculous, and it's a cool way of setting the emotional mood of that. So definitely give that a shot. It's definitely less than the cost of a latte, so it's worth checking out.
So that's pretty cheap. Well, thanks very much for your time, Frank. And
you're welcome, man. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Can't wait to see what you do in the future, and I'll definitely be checking those out tonight now. Well, I can check out the free-to-play one. I don't need to get paid to play that yet.
Sure.
All right, so thanks very much.
All right, thanks a lot, Kev.
Good night. Talk to you again.